Do the heavens declare the glory of God, or are they the result of Mother Nature?
How observations in astronomy support the Bible, today on Creation Magazine Live. I'm Richard Fangrad.
And I'm Calvin Smith.
Welcome to Creation Magazine Live. On this episode, we're going to be talking about astronomy,
right,
and observations that are made in the heavens. There are a number of telescopes, ground-based telescopes. Do you know there are about 30 operational telescopes, space telescopes, in operation right now? There have been many in the past. People are most familiar with the Hubble telescope.
Of course, yeah.
And here's a picture of what the Hubble looks like. And of course, folks are also aware, most people I think are aware, that the Hubble had a flaw initially, and through an amazing space shuttle mission it was repaired. You can see here a picture before the optics repair of Hubble, and here's after.
Right, you can see quite a difference.
Pretty amazing, isn't it? There again, before, and there's after. Huge difference there, yeah, in the repair, but it's through these telescopes that we see a lot of observations from the heavens.
Right, and absolutely beautiful objects out there in space, just some amazing shots that we received back. But of course, these pictures that we see the things that we observe, they cause us to ask some questions.
Sure.
Right? So, how did it begin, and when did it begin?
Yes.
Where did all that beauty, where did all those objects, where did all those things come from? How and when? And
to dive into to these questions, we can look at a very interesting image that was actually captured by the Hubble. Right. It was called the Hubble Deep Field image. The Hubble was pointed at a part of the sky that was empty. Here you can see it's just above the Big Dipper there. It wasn't pointed at a star, a galaxy, or anything. It was basically empty. And here's the size, that little L you see in the center of the screen there, that's the picture, the size of the picture that was taken. The moon, if we put the moon beside it, that's how big the moon would look. And so you can see that it's a very small section of sky. And here is the image that came back. The Hubble was actually focused on that for a very, very long time to collect enough light. Now this is the Hubble Deep Field image. What you're seeing here, this is every point of light that you see in the image there is a galaxy of about 100 million stars. And there's about 3,000 galaxies in that image. Just incredible. It's believed to be representative of the entire sky. And if we wanted to look at the entire sky, 500,000 of these images would be needed to cover the entire sky. So
wow! So this is just one little spot from our point of view of what we see in the night sky, and you'd have to have how many? 500,000?
500,000 of those images to cover the entire sky.
Wow!
And each one of those images has about 3,000 galaxies, and every one of those galaxies has about 100 million stars.
That's amazing.
Just incredible. And so again, the question is, how do we explain that?
Right.
How do those galaxies come to be? Is it the Big Bang? Is it does it fit with the Bible? What does it fit with? Which version of history does it fit with?
Right. Because commonly people are taught about a Big Bang theory, origin of the universe, right?
That's the most common explanation nowadays.
Right.
Sure.
If you're sitting in a science class somewhere, you're most likely going to encounter that. Of course, the Bible says that the heavens declare the glory of God. So that means that it was God who created all things. And so really when we're looking at these images and we're getting taught about the concept of Big Bang, et cetera, we need to ask ourselves, is the data that we're looking at, is it the only way? Is the Big Bang really the only way to explain the data that we see? Because let's face it, we're all looking at the same stuff.
Yep.
Right, we have access to this information. We can look at these pictures, et cetera. We can do all these experiments, but we're looking at the same bit of data. Why is it always just seems to be one way of explaining that
one
data?
view? Yes.
Right. Because no one saw it created.
Right. No one alive today saw it being created.
Right.
And so which yeah, how do you explain how it got there?
Right.
And is the Big Bang the only, as you said, is it the only possible explanation? Well, of course not. There could be dozens of different ways of explaining what we're seeing, for example, in the Hubble Deep Field Image.
Right, because we're not talking about observational science in the sense that we can repeat an experiment of, set up an experiment in a lab and show something happening, water boiling, or gravity, something falling, or something like that. We're just making conjecture about what might have happened in the past.
And that question can be asked of just about any other scientific data in any other field having to do with the past.
Right.
Is evolution the only possible explanation? And no, of course, there's many explanations.
In some parts of Africa, it's actually an advantage to have mutated, oddly shaped red blood cells. This condition, known as sickle cell anemia, is usually a disadvantage, but ironically, it can actually help protect someone from malarial infection because a sickled red blood cell is less appetizing for the malaria parasite. Many people mistakenly view this sort of change as an example of evolution in action because a mutation in DNA has made people better adapted to their environment. But if microbes really did turn into mankind, which is what evolution teaches, this would require the addition of new DNA information to turn the relatively simple genome of a microbe into the vastly more complicated one of a person. In the case of sickle cell anemia, the opposite has happened because DNA information has been corrupted and lost, not gained, because the crippled blood cells are less able to transport oxygen.
To find out more from Creation Ministries International, visit our website, creation.com.
Okay, so we're talking about what we see, the Hubble Deep Field Image, and we're saying, okay, is the Big Bang the only explanation for what we're taking a look at?
Yeah, you'd certainly get that impression reading textbooks on astronomy and watching programs on TV that there is no other explanation for
right.
that.
If you keep hearing the same thing, you must think, well, that's the one.
Yeah. So let's delve into this a little bit more deeply into the Hubble Deep Field Image. Light takes time to get to us. That's a basic, there's the speed of light. For example, this picture here, the light from the sun, it takes 8 minutes to get here. That picture, you're seeing a picture of what the sun looked like 8 minutes ago because it takes 8 light minutes at the speed of light to travel from the sun to the earth.
Right.
Now, in the Hubble Deep Field Image, the light, and this is according to evolutionists, we'll just use their assumptions for a moment here. According to evolutionists, the light has been on its way for 12 billion years. Well, there we have a problem.
Right.
The problem is that you cannot get mature galaxies 12 billion years ago.
There's not enough time.
There's not enough time.
Right.
The Big Bang apparently happened 13.75, and well, look at the accuracy there. Wow. They're very sure this time.
Yeah.
13.75 billion years ago. That's not enough time to get mature galaxies.
Right. Now, this observation has usually been put against creationists because they say, well, it's like you guys talk about a young creation of the universe, and yet it takes light a long time to travel. And most people think, well, that's just creationists' problem, right? That's just religious folks' problem. That Big Bangers, they don't have a problem with that, but obviously they do.
Yes, yeah, it leads to other problems as well. But obviously evolutionary astrophysicists and astronomers have recognized this. Here's D. Goldsmith. He says this leaves an uncomfortably short time for galaxies to form after the origin of the universe itself.
Right.
So it's, again, a problem.
And we see other quotes. This is R. Cohen. Title of the article, Mature Before Their Time. This is from Science News in 2003. It says, in the Big Bang model, the vast majority of the galaxies are relatively late bloomers, taking many billions of years to pack on mass either by pulling in gas from the surrounding intergalactic medium or merging with neighboring galaxies. The standard model still can't easily account for a large number of mature or massive galaxies in the early universe. So evolutionists know this is a problem. Big Bangers are recognizing that this is a problem. This isn't just something we're pulling out of our hats, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Yeah, and so here's an observation
that
doesn't fit well with the Big Bang. And we'll talk about others as we go on here. But now, what about creation? If we have, there's the Hubble Deep Field Image, and we have different interpretations. You have the Big Bang and so on. Well, creation, God created a fully functional universe with mature people, animals, plants, stars, galaxies, and so on, right at the beginning.
Well, if you start with that assumption,
That's what the Bible says. That's the history that we accept. We
Right.
don't. I mean, the Bible doesn't talk about the millions of years and so on. That fits with the observation that the Hubble made of the Hubble Deep Field image,
Right.
that amazing image.
so it really depends on what starting point you're going to go with, if there's any problem with the observational evidence.
That's right, yeah.
Now, some Christians, many times I've been out on ministry, of course, and you've received this too, some Christians say, well, couldn't God have created the universe with the appearance of
Yes,
age?
the appearance
so
of age.
the Earth just looks old. I've heard things like that, and I say, well, actually, the Earth looks like it's been rung through the ringer. That's what I said to them, because of course we believe in a global flood as described in Genesis 6-9. What would that have done? Would have devastated the Earth and
Right,
all the
yeah.
rock deposits and stuff like that. So,
Yeah. But we've gotten away from that terminology because the
Right.
appearance of age, even that phrase implies deception on God's part.
right,
God
it
created
looks
things-
old, but it's not.
Right, yeah. Rather, we're going with this, what we just had here, a fully functional, complete creation.
Right.
The difference is, it doesn't have the appearance of age. It's fully functional. The example that's often given is, okay, Adam at the end of day 6 goes into a tree, goes into a forest, cuts down a tree with his chainsaw because
Yeah.
he wants to make a campfire for Eve or something.
Are there any tree rings there?
You have tree rings. Tree rings are a leftover, a sign of an annual variation in seasons, usually.
The result of a process.
Right.
Right.
But the tree probably wouldn't have had tree rings.
Right.
Now that example doesn't work, but you get the idea. One is the fully functional tree, no tree rings.
Right.
The other one has the appearance of age, but it's not really experienced any age. That's the difference.
Everyone likes to get things for free. Thanks to donors at Creation Ministries International, we have put great effort into making huge amounts of faith-building information freely available online. Creation.com now has more than 8,000 articles. Some of CMI's most popular books are in PDF format to read online for free. All 48 episodes of Creation Magazine Live and other teaching videos are online at no charge. Consider making a donation, enabling us to continue producing free faith-building information.
Okay, let's look at another observation. We're looking at different observations from the heavens and asking the question, what is a better explanation for those observations? Is that the Big Bang, millions of years that we hear in the media and through the school and everywhere else? Or is the Bible's record of history, rather than the evolutionary record of history, a better explanation for the observations that astronomers are making?
Right.
Now let's think about the redshift of light from galaxies. If we think of the visible spectrum, here's the visible light anyways, and it goes beyond that. At one end, at the high end here, you have this is high frequency, shorter wavelength light, goes up to violet and ultraviolet, and then at the other end you have low frequency, longer wavelength light, red or infrared, down below that.
Right. So if you get a light wave, right, and you stretch it out, its frequency is lowered towards the red, that would be redshift.
That's
right?
a redshift. Yeah, that's what the redshift is.
Right.
And actually astronomers can tell what elements the star or the galaxy is primarily burning. For example, here's what the spectral lines for hydrogen look like.
Right.
Hydrogen, when you burn hydrogen, it produces energy, or light, if you want to think of it that way, at these frequencies. But what astronomers are seeing in their telescopes is this. There's the spectrum, the hydrogen spectrum, but look, it's been red shifted.
Right. Yeah.
It's been shifted lower in frequency.
Right.
And you can also have blue shifts, and there's an example of what a blue shift would look like, but it's primarily red shift.
So the interpretation then is if it's red shifted, it's moving away from us. If it's blue shifted, it's moving towards us.
That's one interpretation. It can
Right.
also be because of the stretching of space and,
Right.
and so on. But a fundamental principle for the Big Bang is that objects farther away from us are more redshifted.
Right.
And quasars have a massive redshift. Quasars are some of the most distant objects.
So according to the Big Bang theorists, then they must be some of the objects that are the most furthest away from us.
Really far away, they have a high redshift.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting, a number of years ago, a quasar was discovered in a galaxy. So a quasar with an extremely high redshift was discovered in a galaxy with a lower redshift. This was discovered in 2004 by a team of astronomers and astrophysicists. You can see the picture there. This included Jeffrey Burbidge and Holton Arp. They published the discovery in the Astrophysical Journal. And you can see another picture here. There's the quasar. And astronomers at first said, no, the quasar is way, way behind the galaxy.
Right.
So it's not associated with it. But there's evidence, for example, that jet of material that, that the quasar is actually being ejected from this galaxy.
So they're connected.
They're physically connected.
We're not talking about something that's back here and back here. They are actually together. And so that's a kind of a hard thing to explain then.
It's hard. It goes against some basic fundamental principles of the Big Bang.
Right.
It's a huge problem. You've got this very high redshift quasar inside and associated with a low redshift galaxy.
Right, so something hard to explain. Now, we don't fully have time here, especially on this program right now, to go into details on what the creationist explanation for that would be. But we just want to point out that there is one, and if you go to creation.com, you can look up an article, creation.com/bye-bye-Big Bang. So it's just bye-bye Big Bang with a dash in between, and there's a creation explanation for that in that article. Because this is a huge challenge. We've seen this before from people who are, especially in astronomy, they say, well, you young Earth creationists, we just don't know how to, explain that. So therefore, the Bible can't really be true, et cetera. Even Christians, in the sense that they're saying, well, we've got to reinterpret Genesis, et cetera, et cetera.
Right, yeah. In this case here with the quasar, the redshifts that quasars have seem to be intrinsic to the quasar itself.
Right.
Where it's something being produced somehow inside the quasar, which throws out everything in the Big Bang. Then it throws out the distances that secular astronomers use to try to figure out the size of the universe.
Right.
It throws out the distribution of galaxies and matter throughout the universe. It's a fundamental assumption.
Fundamental presuppositions about the Big Bang theory.
That's right.
Actually, this observation actually speaks against that.
That's right.
So again, new discoveries, and that's why we encourage Christians to just trust the Scripture, and usually the evidence sorts itself out after a little while.
That's right, yeah.
For many years, radio telescopes have been scanning the heavens as part of a program known as SETI. SETI stands for the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. They hope that one day they'll stumble across a coded message or information from outer space. Then we'll know for sure that there's intelligent life out there, because only an intelligent being could have sent such a coded message. The irony is that SETI enthusiasts are inconsistent in the way they use this criterion. If they swapped their radio telescopes for a molecular biology lab and considered DNA, they'd discover encyclopedic quantities of coded information. Yet if someone suggests this coded information points to an intelligent source, they are dismissed as an idiot. The SETI program recognizes that only intelligent minds can produce complex coded messages. Why is the DNA information in living things treated differently? Is it because the intelligence responsible must be the creator God of the Bible?
To find out more from Creation Ministries International, visit our website, creation.com.
All right, there are some other problems with the Big Bang that we could talk about.
Right. People don't often hear about problems with the Big Bang. You ever watch, some of these shows on TV, Discovery Channel, things like that? You don't often hear about all the problems. Usually you hear about this nice story and it just all works together.
Yes, yeah. And in the journals, in the scientific magazines and so on, there's a lot of discussion among evolutionary astronomers and astrophysicists about problems with the Big Bang.
Yep.
And there have even been organizations of astrophysicists that have signed papers and say, look, we think the Big Bang is a joke, and
we need to get a new model, etc.
One of the only reasons it hasn't been turfed already is because there's nothing good to replace it that the evolutionists have.
Right. And I think the simplistic the simplistic description, even when you say the Big Bang, now usually people have a wrong idea about what the Big Bang means. They think it's this explosion from the center and it goes
into
outwards.
pre-existing space, and actually space expanded along with that.
And that's not what Big Bangers believe. But I think a lot of times you talk to people and they really don't know what the Big Bang means, but they just get this idea, okay, there was something that exploded and here we are. That's oversimplistic, but many times.
But I mean, if we were to run through it, there's some problems with the Big Bang.
Yeah.
One of the first problems is you can't get from gas to solid objects like dust.
Right.
The Big Bang starts, and you have initially a whole bunch of energy, and then they say mostly hydrogen, perhaps some helium as well. An expanding cloud of gas will not reverse its expansion and collapse into solid objects.
Right.
How do you get grains of sand from gas? Gas not inside a container.
Right.
And some have suggested that, well, you can, if the gas is compressed by a shock wave of an exploding star.
We haven't even got stars yet. What are we talking about?
We're not talking about having stars or anything.
We don't even have...
It's just gas.
Yeah.
So that,
how do you get any solid objects? We don't even have solid objects yet. We don't have stars or anything like that. It's kind of putting the horse about...
that's a big problem. Number two, we can think of some other problems. If you could get dust from gas,
Right.
then there's other problems as well.
Mm-hmm. You can't get dust to planets.
So the next stage breaks down.
Right. How do you get that dust to clump together? Because even if you get it to clump together and you get some, I don't know, pebbles or rocks or something like that, and they start banging together, well, they're going to go back into dust.
And turn each other back into dust.
Which, you know, so I don't know. You had some problems there as well.
And you can't get, you can't get from dust to planets. Right. If you could have the dust, and okay, you can't get from dust to planets. There's a quote here from Martin Harwood. Once these planetesimals, these asteroids essentially,
right.
have been formed, further growth of planets may occur through their gravitational accretion into large bodies. Just how that takes place is not understood.
Right. So it might happen. We have no way of knowing how it would happen. Then how do you know it might have happened or it might happen?
Right. Yeah. It's a story that within which they're trying to fit the observations from the world around
that's a very interesting quote. It might occur, but how it would occur, we don't know. But it might.
Yeah.
It's very much...
Can't even imagine it happening. We don't know how.
Conjecture, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so how do you get from planets to stars? That would be another question to ask. I mean, we needed stars even to get the gas to turn into dust, but...
Yeah, okay. I mean, if we start with no stars and so on,
right.
It's been said that star formation is perhaps the weakest link in the stellar evolution theory. Even if all the other stages worked, and they don't,
right.
and even evolutionists know that. Evolutionists have commented on this. Here's one quote. Abraham Loeb of Harvard Center for Astrophysics says, "The truth is that we don't understand star formation at a fundamental level."
Right. So if I'm sitting there on my couch on a Sunday afternoon, and I click on the TV, and they've got a story, and and it sounds very persuasive, and they usually use very detailed dates, in the sense that 13.6 billion years ago, this occurred.
There.
And you're like, oh, wow, it sounds so good. They must have this down, And then 4.5 billion years. I mean, it sounds like it's just, this is history. Like I would open up a history book and I would read, Napoleon and then this and that and then America and all this stuff. But really, it's just a story. And better to trust the God that was there, that wrote the real story of history, than just trust the fallible opinions of man, which is what we're trying to point out.
The reason that the Creation Answers book is so popular is because it covers a huge range of topics and answers more than 60 of the most asked questions about Genesis and the creation evolution issue. Questions like, what is the evidence for God's existence? Could the days in Genesis 1 be long periods of time? How did all the animals fit on Noah's Ark? Does radioisotope dating prove that the Earth is very old? Where do dinosaurs fit into the Bible? And many more. To order your copy, visit creation.com.
Okay, it's time for the In the News segment. What's going on in the news? We've got an interesting story from Chile today.
Right, and this was actually covered in our Creation magazine, so we're just going to read it here. An international team announced in October 2011 that they had found fossils of 80 baleen whales buried in the deserts in Chile. In the desert in Chile. Scientists raced against time to document and excavate the bus-sized fossils before local road construction destroyed the site. The remarkably preserved fossils stunned the researchers, who were asking why so many died at once, what buried them so quickly, and why they were so far inland. But if they believed the Bible, they would not be so puzzled. The whales perished late in Noah's flood and were buried in sediments as the waters were retreating from the land. For more on this, see creation.com/whale Chile. And so that was what was in the news. We reported on it. And it's interesting that if you keep, a lookout, and I do, of course, I'll just check the news. I often see stuff like this that so obviously points to the record of the Bible, the fact that there was a flood. How would you get? Look at the questions. Why were there so many of them? How did they get so far inland
and stuff? And even casual Christians who know a little bit about the Bible can answer the question. While the world was at one point covered with a global flood. Yeah. Here's another example of we've been talking about astronomy. Here's another example of some data.
Yep.
Fossils found in Chile, far from the ocean today.
Right.
And what's the better interpretation?
Yeah.
I mean, the ocean at one point covered the land. It buried things rapidly, buried these whales rapidly, obviously.
Right.
The flood is a really good explanation for that. I mean, as a Christian, I'm good with that. I'm with finding 80 whales, 80 these whales way inland in Chile. That fits with what I believe as a Christian. What fits with the Bible.
Yeah, I've actually heard skeptics say, well, you guys start with the Bible. So therefore, you're not being scientific because you're already starting with the conclusion. So we see evidence like this. Well, you guys are just going to say it was the flood. Okay, what exactly is wrong with that? Because
they do the same thing.
They do the same thing. What they're not revealing is the fact that they're playing this game of naturalism, right? Well, this had to happen naturally somehow. God is not involved. Many times you'll hear, atheists and evolutionists just, well, there is no God, so we're going to have to make this data fit with some kind of natural conclusion. It doesn't matter what the evidence points to. It doesn't matter that you can have 3 chapters in Genesis devoted to 1 year of Earth history that would completely explain this physical evidence. We're not going to consider that, and we're only going to play our game here of naturalism. And
right.
And you guys, by the way, are unscientific because you don't do what we do. Well, it's kind of like saying this is my bat and my ball, and if you don't play by my rules, I'm going home. Well,
yeah. it's and they oftentimes paint themselves into a corner instead of saying, let's really think of where is this evidence leading.
Right.
Does it? In many cases, it leads to the conclusion that there must be an intelligent designer, but that conclusion is censored out from the very beginning.
Right.
They don't even,
or even that the Bible contains true history.
That's right. Yeah.
Because really, who's being more scientific? The creationist says there may be a naturalistic explanation for certain processes, certain things we see.
But we're open to
supernatural.
Yes.
But if you've already censored out supernatural, then you're censoring out one possible explanation, which means ultimately you're not being as scientific as you should be. See you next time.